destination. Darkness is quite near your feet and senses through your ears. And tide is rising, drought is non-existent. Sins are washed away, all the faults that you were facing. Sunset chaser, where's your new location? Searching for a purpose, the truth is making you nervous. And sunlight's waiting, there's a happy ending. Picture perfect skies, does your life have any meaning? Oh, darling, don't you cry no more, as the sun will soon shine 1,000 times. Don't you worry, dear, dark clouds will soon clear for you. Daylight saver till the next adventure. Love is all around, but you're focused on your frowning. Rays are burning, a chemiluminescence, feeling through the gloom, tense and patient for its blooming. Oh, darling, don't you cry no more, as the sun will soon shine 1,000 times. Don't you worry, dear, dark clouds will soon clear for you.
Sunny sea, there's no point of beating me, as the night took my innocence. I'm starting to see there's no mention of happiness. Life I possess, I offer it to you as you banish regret. In my heart, tape bound, I can't hardly speak. Tracks of my tears slipped away, I am weak. As I sing this last melody, set your own rest. Sunny song is my final request.
Oh, darling, don't you cry no more, as the sun will soon shine 1,000 times. Don't you worry, dear, dark clouds will soon clear for you.
Aloha, everyone, and good afternoon, and welcome to the 41st Annual Hawaii International Film Festival presented by Holly Kalani, and this afternoon's discussion with the directors of Storm Lake, hosted by Chad Blair from Honolulu Civil Beat. My name is Anna Page. I'm the director of programming at the festival, and I'm really excited to present this talk to you today. Really getting in depth around one of my favorite documentaries in the film program this year, Storm Lake. This film follows Art Cullen and his Storm Lake times as they work through all of the challenges of running a small town newspaper in this day and age, dealing with everything from the political situation to the pandemic and touching on issues related to both local and national journalism. So before we get started today, I'm going to take a moment for some housekeeping bits, and then I'm going to introduce our panelists. If you are watching here live on Facebook or on our YouTube channel, feel free to make comments or ask any questions in the comments box, and those will come straight through to our live stream here, and we'll get those answered for you. Also, if you are not watching this live, please do not comment. We will not be able to respond to you at that time. We will have this discussion available up on our YouTube and our Facebook after today for others to watch as well. So without further ado, I just want to give a special mahalo to Honolulu Civil Beat. They are our sponsor for our documentaries program this year at Hiff, and we're really grateful for their support. And I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. We have Jerry Risius. Jerry is the co-director and cinematographer of this film. He is Iowa born and raised, and he brings over 25 years experience as director of photography on such projects as The Kingmaker, Generation Wealth, and Seeing All Red. Storm Lake is his directorial debut. Also, we have co-director and producer Beth Levison. Beth Levison is based in New York, and her most recent producing credits include Women in Blue, Made in Boise, and 32 Pills. Storm Lake makes her return to directing after a 10-year pause. She is also co-founder of Documentary Producers Alliance and an AMPAS member. And moderating today's discussion, we have Chad Blair. Chad Blair has been a writer, editor, and teacher in Honolulu for more than 30 years. He's currently a politics and opinion editor for Honolulu Civil Beat and focuses especially on how political and policy decisions impact people and communities. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Chad Blair, Jerry Risius, and Beth Levison. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anna. You said our names correctly. You get a star.
Aloha, everyone.
So, Jerry, where are you, by the way? Are you in Iowa right now, or somewhere else?
No. I've been in New York since 30 years now, since 1990, in fact. So I grew up in Iowa, and a farm actually not too far away from Storm Lake, and then I moved here 30 years ago.
Okay, and Beth, I think you're in New York as well, correct?
Yeah, I'm actually in my office in Brooklyn, so I could run to Jerry's apartment.
I was going to say, we're on the same borough right now. Usually we're in different boroughs.
Yeah.
Well, Anna earlier said good afternoon. I guess it's a good evening to the both of you and anybody else attending in your time zones. Good morning if someone else is tuning in earlier time zones. I got to tell you, I just watched Storm Lake yesterday, and just a little background. I mean, obviously I'm a journalist, but I grew up and spent some formative years in Nebraska, actually in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is not all that far from Storm Lakes. And my first paying steady job as a teenager was a paper boy, although I wasn't delivering it in cars like John and Art Cullen are, but I was on my bicycle. And also as well, I got to tell you, just like pork is so important, and corn, obviously, to Storm Lake, beef and corn are the priorities in Nebraska. Corn huskers is what we used to be called.
Yeah.
And I should also add that there's a scene when Dolores, I'm not sure where she visits, but she can smell the feed farms. Is that right? And she's asking the person, is it that bad all the time? Does it smell like that? I did live and go to college in Colorado, and we lived near a Montfort plant where it's a slaughterhouse. So I know exactly what that smell is like. So the film really brought back a lot of memories. I was just back in Nebraska 5 years ago. Hasn't changed too much, but the paper is still surviving. Different name now, but it was really a treat to kind of visit back home. So I want to start first with both of you. Why Storm Lake? And I wondered, Jerry, did it have something to do with the fact that you are originally from Iowa, and that's why you chose to focus on the both of you on the Cullens?
Yes, it certainly did. Thanks. Thanks again for having us. I really appreciate this opportunity and being with everyone out there. So, again, as I was mentioning, I grew up in a very small farm in Iowa. You know, it was in the 70s and like late 60s and 70s. So it was a much smaller and earlier time. So like farmers could still make a living off of, say, 160 acres, which is not really possible anymore. But I still continue to go back to Iowa and visit my family and friends, and I'm still interested in all things Iowa, you know, as you are probably with Nebraska. So, you know, I was reading, I guess, the results of the Pulitzer in the spring of 2017, and the headline was announced, and it was literally, you know, small North Iowa town, small North Iowa newspaper wins Pulitzer Prize. And I had my kind of like exorcist moment where my head just kind of spun on itself. And I hold on, Iowa and Pulitzer, and I immediately looked up Art. I looked up the Storm Lake Times. I read his articles. Within a few days, I called him up and just, you know, had a long talk. And eventually, I talked to him about coming out and spending an afternoon with him filming for try to build a character reel, which I then did. And I then spent a couple of months cutting it together with a student of mine from the School of Visual Arts, where Beth and I both teach. Meanwhile, also in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I wonder if Beth is available to work on this with me. So it took a while, but then actually I was able to convince Beth to come on and actually help us, which then, of course, once Beth got involved, things just really took off.
And I want to make sure I understood correctly. The 2017 prize actually was for Art Cullen specifically, and his editorial writing, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for taking on big corporate ag. And of course, the film focuses so much on the small farmers. That was the Pulitzer Award. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, in a nutshell, he was trying to get dark money out of a lawsuit that was about pollution that was in the Raccoon River, which leads to the Des Moines River, and then Des Moines Water Works, which cleans the water for the city of Des Moines, was suing their county because of all of the pollution and toxins, nitrates and phosphates.
Yeah, so, the film mentions waterworks, and I just want to make sure. And you notice I said Pulitzer. Some say Pulitzer. As a journalist, we're trained to say Pulitzer, but everyone else says Pulitzer. Beth, to you now, I got to ask you. You're based in New York City. Had you ever been to Iowa, let alone in January and February when it's so cold?
That's funny. No, I mean, I've spent some time in the Midwest. I always had a lot of friends in the Midwest, mostly Minnesota, Minneapolis. My best friend is from Iowa, actually, but I had never been. And when we were shooting in winter, I would make these comments like, man, people talk about Minnesota cold, but nobody talks about Iowa cold, and it's colder.
And farther south.
Maybe because we were on a lake. I mean, it was really cold. Yeah.
I do think that has something to do with it, just like Chicago is so cold from the Michigan lake. But I was thinking Minnesota, it's like Amy Klobuchar, right? Says in your film, I can see Iowa, you know, from my front porch, echoing, I believe, Sarah Palin and Alaska and so forth.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah. But I do have some questions specific to the film, and then I do want to go on to some questions generally about how important local journalism is, the state of the industry, what kind of impact you hope your film will have. But let me just check with you. I did have to go online and double check, and sure enough, the Storm Lake Times is online. I just checked it out yesterday, actually today, before we came into to stream this, and there was the bylines for Art and for John and for Dolores and for Tom. They were all right there. Prominently featured were the births and the deaths, which is something that Art makes a point of saying that's very important to people, more important than Elizabeth Warren, I think he says at one point. And of course, the coverage was very similar to what you would expect. I didn't look at the recipe section, but I did want to ask you, I believe it's $6.99 a month. That's what they're doing now as part of this institute they're with. They're charging. I know I saw your eyes go up. I believe it's at $6.99 a month. Boy, that's a heck of a deal.
Yeah,
you can't even buy the Sunday New York Times for $6.99
for the whole Times. Yeah, no, it's $7 a month, or I believe $70 for the year.
Okay, great. Do they still have a print edition?
Yes, and that's bi-weekly. They print it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then it comes out on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Okay. I think this question goes to Beth first, but really the two of you are a team. Why did you choose not to have a narrator, meaning someone else voicing over, the flow of the film? And of course, you used directly the voices of the participants, the subjects of the film. Was that a decision early on that, with Art Cullen, you clearly had a star in the making, or did you originally think, no, maybe we'll have someone narrate this?
Never.
No.
Jerry and I are really interested in what's called verite documentary filmmaking, which is really telling stories and making films through scenes. And a lot of times when you have a narrator, you sort of a narrator and they're telling you what's happening, and then kind of the footage, it's like see and say, or like show and tell. And we really wanted to, first of all, no one could write narration that could match anything that Art writes. And we really wanted to bring people into that world and really immerse them in it. And just a narrator really reminds you that you are that someone is telling you what to look at and when and how to think about something. And we just really wanted it to be immersive and as authentic and unmitigated as possible. So we kind of never entertained the idea of a narrator.
Okay. What did the Cullen family think, particularly Art and John? When you mentioned, Jerry, that you reached out long after the prize was awarded. How receptive were they to? Because I'm guessing it was more than just the two of you. You probably brought in some others as part of your crew. Is that right?
We did, but certainly when I was first going out there, it was just me, and they were very receptive. They tell stories. I think that they believe in themselves. They believe in their story a lot, and I think, as Whitney Robinson, who does the sales there, mentioned, after he won the Pulitzer, they actually suffered financially. So their advertising went down, their subscriptions went down. And there was something that I think that in their ideas of us telling their story that might have been redemptive. And also I have to say, this is not tooting my own horn, but I'm an Iowan, right? So, we connected early on, and shared and loved things, Iowan. I think in Iowa, we all have kind of this inferiority complex just based on the fact that we're all flyovers. So there's a sense, I think, that when they can talk about their work, that it's a point of pride, I think, for certainly all the Cullens and John and Art in particular.
And I think they were really proud that an Iowa boy kind of came home, done well in the world, made it in New York, toured the world with Anthony Bourdain, and then was interested in telling this story about this family in their paper.
Now, how about the timing of this all? You could not possibly, I guess you knew the Iowa caucus was on the horizon. Everybody did. And then at least 5 of the candidates, although I don't think I saw John Delaney, but at least 4 or 5 are featured. Yeah. That's okay. That's all right. Most people can't even remember who he was and why he was in the race.
Tim Ryan.
Tim Ryan was
had to make choices.
No, I think you made some good choices, particularly with Pete Buttigieg coming into the office like that. Were there areas, though, you couldn't possibly have seen the disaster that the Iowa caucus would end up being? There's talk in the film that may have botched it for 2024 because they couldn't get the results. And ultimately, Buttigieg very narrowly defeated Bernie Sanders. Do I have those numbers correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that was one thing. And then COVID, my God, who could possibly have seen that coming as well? But was there a time frame that you intentionally picked? Yes, we want to be there for the caucus. And of course, you couldn't possibly see the virus coming.
I mean,
Go ahead.
I
Yeah,
mean,
either one,
so we started developing the story together in late 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, gee, wouldn't it be great to sort of maybe film during the presidential election year, that window. And then we learned that art was tapped to moderate that multi-candidate Democratic event in March of 2019. And so we thought, then, maybe we could really start at the very start of the presidential election cycle and then, conclude with it and really bookend the film in that way. So we got really lucky. We raised some money so that we could conduct that first shoot where Amy Klobuchar says, I can see Iowa from my front porch. And we shot some other stuff. And then we were kind of off and running. And
Ice Out Day.
Ice
Out Day was also.
Yeah. So we knew that's the thing. Like, we thought, and we, we'll go out for that. Then we started working on our schedule. We'll go out for the Iowa caucuses. But of course, you can never predict the future. And that's both. I mean, that's what makes documentary filmmaking kind of, when you're doing these unfolding stories, in a way, so exciting, so nerve-wracking, so uncertain. And,
and if it works out, then, I mean, in our particular case, it just kept on developing. Like, we had no idea the ideas. We did not want to make a political film, but we knew that politics could, as Beth says, bookend, the kind of at least the cycle of what, the film was going through. But yeah, no, you didn't know, you don't know. And that's kind of an exciting thing and also a terrifying thing.
How did the town, go ahead, Beth, please.
Well, I guess the only thing that I was going to say is, once COVID happened, all of a sudden, all the themes that we were developing, all of the, all the narrative threads that we were weaving, they all really kind of came together at COVID. And so once COVID was happening, we knew that we were going to kind of have to build to that moment. And in a way, sometimes happens. I mean, that COVID happened at all, that the way that COVID impacted this community, we'd never wish that on anyone, but in some ways it did make the film stronger, and allowed us to kind of build to this cataclysmic event that showed the value of a newspaper, in a way that we probably wouldn't have been able to if COVID hadn't happened.
Yeah, in fact, of course, even though the paper, they were all in lockdown like everybody for so long, but once they were back up and running, they were able to report cases that were happening. Even though the State Department of Health and the Trump administration was not giving them much information, they were able to track down, I believe it was the workers at Tyson, and then they looked at the care homes and so forth. So Beth, this totally underscores your point about, it's more than just a thread. It really just illustrated the reason why we need a local press, why we need to help our community. Let me ask you this. How did the local folks at Storm Lake, you saw John Snyder and some other people, Tom Lane, I think, the councilman, how did they react when, by the way, we're bringing a film crew with us? Was there any resistance on the part of them or anybody that was, may have been featured and said, no, take that camera out of my face, please?
Yeah, I'd say it's a mixed bag. We had people, I think one of the first shoots we did, Beth, we haven't even talked about this, but one of the first shoots we did, there was the banker, right, who came in.
Oh,
you remember there was a banker, and
I didn't think you were going to mention him. I thought you were going to mention the Alta city.
No, yeah. So I mean, but there's multiple cases. But we had a banker that came in, and they had actually loaned. And one of our ideas was really to show the financial struggles. And we knew, just from John and Art, that they were struggling financially. They were barely hanging on. They had lost money the previous year. The year we were there, I think they made $2,000, and then of course they lost everything. But we met him and we got along, and he likes the Cullens, but he wanted nothing to do with the film, And then we also went to a city council meeting in the county not actually Storm Lake, but another small town, and we almost got driven out. We got yelled at by the mayor to get out, and we had to leave, and then we talked to a police officer, and he said we have
It's
every right
against
to
the
be there.
rules to kick us out, or it's against the law. Yeah, it's public space.
The police actually were there, and they actually escorted us back in, and that was we ended up not using any of the scenes because it didn't quite work out, but we did have some of the shots when we were building I think the montage that introduces Tom Cullen, because he's reporting one of those shots. I think is from that.
This isn't when he goes to the action group, the farm action group. That's not the same scene. This is a different scene. Yeah. Well, why were you rejected by the mayor and others? What were they concerned about? They must have given you some reason.
I think, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I guess what's so interesting is we had 2 instances very early on where people did not want us there. And then we almost never confronted it again. But certainly with the city council meeting, that was really political. And it was a very, very, very conservative mayor who was using the playbook of our last president, I guess I would say. And sort of felt like he could rule in that way, when in fact, in a democracy, you can't. So he tried to kick us out, but the police were like, "You have every right to be here."
I mean,
so
these
we
were
went back in.
These were public forums at public facilities, correct?
But essentially, the Cullens and in particular Tom Cullen had reported on different activities that were not always favorable in their light, and so I think that he took issue at it and didn't want us there essentially.
The mayor,
the Alta mayor.
How about the Cullen family itself? I mean, you go into their home. You go into their newsroom, you see them work in the streets, going out in the field and so forth. Was there any point where they turned to you and said, this is better not get this into the video? You don't have to tell us what it was unless you'd like to, but probably not. But any place where they said there's a barrier here?
No. I mean, I think one thing that we've been talking about the film a lot with Art, but one thing that Art always says is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And he has asked so many people over the course of his career to tell their stories that he felt like it was also his obligation to tell his story. And I think that also has to do with the trust that he had in us, but also that, we would, we weren't going to be doing any expose piece. We were just trying to do a very a non-hyperbolic kind of documentary about about his family
But I think it's funny because I mean, they really either they were very comfortable or they were just so busy that they really didn't think about what we were filming. I think it was probably a combination of both. But I also think they had no idea what we were really making in the end or what we were working toward. And when they saw the completed film, they were just so completely overwhelmed that this is what all that shooting sort of resulted in. And
what was that like? Set the scene. Where did you have if you will, the premiere where they were able to see it?
We had 2 screenings. You want?
No, just we had the rough cut that we did in their office. Yeah.
So I'll do the first one. You could do the second one. So first, we felt like we wanted to give them, meaningful consultation, on the film. Like if there was something that was going to upset them or misrepresent them, we wanted to give them that opportunity. This film is going to go out into the world. Millions of people are going to see it. So. The film was at a before picture lock, and the footage didn't look great because we hadn't, color corrected it, and it didn't sound great because it wasn't mixed, and there were some things that were a little bit rough, but I'll never forget that Dolores said, like, they were just in shock, they were okay with everything, but Dolores said, "Can't believe what you did. I mean, we're just regular people." So she was really overwhelmed by it. And I think,
was very proud of her son.
And very proud.
She left that saying like, oh my God, because she had never seen Tom confront Chuck Grassley before until like we actually got that on film. She was like, oh my God, that's my son.
That was like the best part. Yeah, she was so proud of Tom and his, reportage. But yeah, I think that they were like at the same time, but they should have been like, because it wasn't really done yet. And then we had a homecoming screening, and Jerry, you run with that one.
In Storm Lake. So in Storm Lake, it was wonderful because Iowa PBS came out and brought a photographer. So we had, a kind of a little red carpet set up with PBS in the back at Storm Lake. So everyone got to take their pictures. It was almost like bringing a little taste of Hollywood out to Storm Lake, Iowa, and then invited all the people who participated. Crews, everyone came out that could or that was in town that had anything to do with the film, and we had a sold out audience that night. It was over 200. I mean, was it?
Yeah.
It was almost 300. It was really, really kind of overwhelming.
Pretty good for a town of, what is it, 20, 30,000 maybe? And that's not even that
Oh
much.
no, 14.
Yeah, no, far smaller than.
But
Go ahead, Beth.
Well, we had a theatrical run for the film across the Midwest because it is flyover country, what Jerry was talking about before. We really wanted to say, we know you're here, you're our audience. And so we launched our theatrical in Storm Lake. And that was really meaningful for the community.
2 more questions about the film, and thanks for indulging my curiosity as a journalist. And then I do want to talk about the state of the industry and what communities can do. Next to Art Cullen, I think the dog might be the star of the show. Is it Peach or Peaches?
Peach, yeah. Peach the news hound.
Oh, Pete. Not Peach.
No, Peach.
It is Peach.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
I did hear it
Peach,
correctly.
Yeah.
I think I even saw it in a subtitle or something. That was just an amazing situation. The most expressive eyes of that dog. And one other question. At one point, Dolores is interviewing and getting a photo of the first newborn of the year, and it's a Micronesian, and she even has a shirt from Pohnpei, and I don't know if she was from the Federated States of Micronesia. Something that we've done here in Hawaii is reported on the vast diaspora of the Micronesians. Tyson, I believe, is the largest employer, and you mentioned the dual language with the sizable Latino population. I just wondered, did you have a sense of a growing Micronesian population in the area other than that, the firstborn? Because it's really quite a story. They're in every state practically.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't give any exact numbers, but I do believe that the ratio of immigrant to people who have stayed is almost 50-50. It may be even more immigrant than less, but there were in the 4th of July parade, there were Micronesians, there were unbelievable, like people from all over the world were in that parade, and there were numbers. I mean, it wasn't like in the thousands, but there were hundreds. And I think once you feel like you have a community, then more people start coming. Certainly that's what has happened there, and there's work, and people are that something that Art talks about is that there's such a diaspora of the local community that people are just leaving, and the parents are sending their kids off. So there's this immigrant community that's coming in, and I think the Times is welcoming them and trying to make them feel at home, and doing that through their reporting.
And it's just so interesting that moment would resonate with you, because it's funny because we went through some rounds where we got some executive notes, and we kept on getting the note to lose that moment. And it was really important to us because we wanted to show that the people that call Storm Lake home are not just, Latin Americans and Mexicans, but it is people from, Micronesia and Sudan and other places. And so it's great that resonates for you.
Oh, it really did. And I noted Sudan as well. And in fact, in that parade, at one point, I think I even saw people wearing lei. And I don't think they were from Hawaii, but that made me feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that also harkens back to Art talking about how he left town, because when he was growing up, it was it was pretty much all white. I think you said there might have been one black family, or maybe it was in one individual, a few Jewish families, but really it was all white, really white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Yeah.
One black person and one Jewish family.
Oh, thank you for even more. Now it's, as you said, Jerry, more of a 50-50. That's really quite a blend. Go ahead.
I mean, in one generation, right? I mean, we can look back on that he did say, and we did, I think, take some of those pictures, but from the 50s. So, I mean, you could say more than one generation, I guess, from the 50s to now. But I mean, this transition has been going on since the late 80s and 90s, but I think now it's just in full swing.
Two final points that I want to bring up and talk about, and we're going to try and bring this in under 45 minutes. And if there are questions, that's great. But let's talk a little bit about overlooking how important local journalism is. You cite the numbers, and they're even more dire since COVID. You call them news deserts, right? Small towns that don't have a newspaper anymore, and the shrinking is just incredible. Do you really think that your film might actually help spur? I mean, it's a very optimistic goal, and I'm biased. I'm a journalist by trade and like to see it. Do you have a sense that you might actually have an impact? People who watch this film and say, gee, we really do need to have a small town paper. We can't depend on Gannett and all the other mega corporations. Do you think that you might be able to make an impact there?
I mean, we're certainly trying. And, I think that people don't really think about their local news source. They think it's just always going to be there. They might think, oh, it's not as good as it used to be. And they might not really put the pieces together as to why. But we're really hoping that the film gets people to rethink their relationship to local news. And, I will say also, like, the response from organizations who are working to sustain its future. There are just so many people who feel like this film can be a tool for them. And I guess just one more thing that, that we hope happens in Hawaii. I was recently screening the film at a film festival called the Hamptons International Film Festival. The Q&A was moderated by a journalist. He's the editor of the local newspaper. And actually everywhere we screen the film, we try to have a Q&A moderated or our festival screening sponsored by a local newspaper. We want to surface the local newspaper and we want to surface the issues. And so what was really great was that at the Hamptons, we were talking about the movie and its themes, and then someone raised their hand and they said to the guy moderating the Q&A, this editor, they said, David, do the themes in the film, do they resonate for you? Are you seeing a drop in advertising? When you write negative stories, do you experience any blowback? And he said, yeah, let me tell you. And I could have kind of walked off stage and they could have had a whole conversation. And I think it really did build this, more understanding between the community and the newspaper. So, we're hoping that these conversations will happen across the country. We've been part of so many of them already. So I think we really hope it will have an impact.
Jerry, you want to add to that?
I mean, that's a lot right there. And I know we're on limited time, I think that's what our real hope is. It's really, to get the almost evangelize, what local journalism does for communities. And I think they also say very quickly in the film, like, the most important pillar of a community can be its banks and its newspapers.
Mm-hmm. While we still have time, I did want to ask you, remember the scene where Tom, who is the son of Art and Dolores, and he's going to take over the paper at some point. It ends so touchingly on the letter from Art to Tom, but at one point he's pitching Art and John, how about a podcast? And Art's like, what? He graciously says, thank you for coming up with the idea, but there's just no way in hell Art Cullen is going to do a podcast, although he'd be terrific, I have a feeling. But it did make me think in my mind, what about the younger generations that get their media in very different ways? I mean, I delivered a newspaper by hand. Well, the folks that are in their 20s and 30s in our newsroom, nobody reads a print newspaper, and they do listen to podcasts, and they do stream, and they do get their RSS feed. And I wonder if we might talk about that, a concern that will that younger generation think a recipe for pea soup is as important as Dolores thinks it is, or is it Miss Piglet? Was that the name of the?
Miss Pork.
Pigtails.
Yeah, Miss Pigtails. Yeah, Little Miss
There's
Pigtails.
Pork
Yeah.
Queen and Little Miss Pigtails.
I love that. See, that is just amazing, and that is so the Midwest. It is absolutely the Midwest. But to this question about can local journalism thrive as we're changing generationally in the way we consume media?
Well, I think that's something that this film tries to bring into the conversation. You know, I think everyone is trying to understand what's happening with media literacy and what the next generation, how they consume news, how they, talk to each other through the different happenings in the world and through that. And so will it be digital? Will it be, through some social media platform? I don't know, but I certainly do. I have a 24-year-old daughter, and she reads the New York Times because I kind of push it on her, but I don't think that she would on her own go out and read that. So yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge to push into the next generation, but I do believe that people are I mean, it's still very hopeful, because I think you're also seeing a small resurgence in journalism, and people are going out and seeing what's happening in their communities and reporting on it.
Did they initially have an online platform? My sense from the film was that it was print until they went through this crisis with COVID and then joined this organization. I forget the name of it, but the Western Iowa, something like that.
Journalism
That's
Foundation.
when they then launched the online page. Is that correct? They were not online while you were filming them up until the end there. Is that right? They did not have an online presence, or did they?
They
Yeah.
did.
Mhm.
They did.
They
Okay.
did, but it became more robust over the course of our filming, and it's going to continue to be more robust. And when we first started filming, they didn't have a daily newsletter, like a news digest, and now they have an emailed daily news digest. So, even though they were loath to modernize in that diner scene, they understand that they have to go digital to ensure their future, at least to some degree for now.
Okay.
So they're doing that.
And go ahead, Jerry.
And no, I will add that regarding the podcast, is that Art, and I have to tell you this, Beth, as well, because he was during our tour, so many people asked him about the podcast. So many people wanted the podcast. People were pushing him, and I think that he was tilting towards doing a podcast. And I'm not sure what happened, but I saw him over the weekend in Denver, and he's maybe there's not enough people reaching out to him again, but I think he's back on the fence. But I'm sure that he'll be able to be pushed, because I think it's definitely worth it. But
He says he has a face for radio.
But in fact, he's got a face for TV and a voice for radio. He's
Yeah.
I couldn't quite channel the right Hollywood actor, but it was a Jimmy Stewart kind of touch.
Sam Elliott.
Yeah, that's
Sam
our
Elliott.
dream. Our dream is for the narrative of fictional adaptation to be made starring Sam Elliott, who was in A Star Is Born more recently.
No,
The hero?
I saw it, and it with Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper.
Yeah,
and it was
Bradley
terrific.
Cooper, yeah.
And there will only be one Sam Elliott. Well, I think this brings us closely up. But before we bring Anna Page back on to wrap us up, I again just want to say, as someone who still is in the journalism business, who has done print and TV and radio and online, and Civil Beat is an online production that depends on viewers. It was gratifying to see other people in this country who care as much as we do, and to get a sense that we're not alone. There's a whole lot of other people that really value this. So Jerry and Beth, please continue your good work and shining a light. And if you come out to Hawaii and want to make a documentary, you got my email. So.
Thank you. I do have to say as well, I've been to Hawaii a couple times, and I did an Anthony Bourdain episode out there, which we loved Hawaii. And I ran, when I was asking if I had a minute, I ran over to get my hat. I don't know if you can see it, but this is to care for the earth. The water carriers, actually, when they built the
Malama Honua. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you can
Oh,
see
that's
that. So
beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
it's so good. Yeah, we spent a day with some of the members who actually built the boat and actually traveled on it. They were young men
great.
at the time when they did it, but I was
Yeah,
very proud to be.
Malama to care to give back. Beth, have you been to Hawaii?
I have. Such an incredible place.
Okay.
I didn't spend enough. I spent, I don't know, 10 days, but really incredible.
Okay. Thanks.
Really
Thanks for
incredible.
the plug, the shameless plug
Yeah,
for our
we
state.
love
You
it.
can come back now. The COVID restrictions we're okay now. Knock on wood. Well, thank you again, and I wish you well. I know it's going on 9:00 your time, and I'm going to bring it back to Anna and Noah. And Noah's going to bring Anna in, and there she is.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Chad.
Hello, it's good to be back. Thank you so much, Chad, Jerry, and Beth, for this wonderful conversation today. I just want to again extend a special mahalo to Honolulu Civil Beat for hosting our discussion this afternoon, evening, for Jerry and Beth, and thank you both for spending your evening discussing this wonderful film and your experience with us. So thank you to everybody. Just as a reminder to our audience watching now, we will have this film available until November 28th on our streaming service. So you can go online to hiff.org to get tickets to watch the film at your leisure during this period. And please stay tuned to hiff.org for many updates on the festival. We will have in-person screenings here until the 14th. And then we are on the neighbor islands in Hilo, Maui, and Kauai from the 18th to the 21st. So stay tuned to hiff.org for all the information about that. And last but not least, before I go, Storm Lake is nominated for our Hiff Audience Award for Best Documentary Feature. So don't forget to vote. You can vote directly in the streaming service on watch.hiff.org using the 5-star system. So don't forget to submit your vote. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much.